The doorbell rang at 9:47 a.m., and Catherine Tessio didn't move. She was still in bed, his bed, wrapped in Paul's faded Northwestern t-shirt, the one that still smelled like his cologne, and the lavender detergent he always bought even though she told him it was too expensive. For days since they lowered him into the ground. 4 days since her husband's body came home in a sealed casket from that nightmare wreckage in Colorado. 4 days since her entire world shattered into a grief so thick she couldn't breathe through it. The doorbell rang again. Catherine pulled the pillow over her head. She wasn't answering. Not for the neighbors with their casseroles and their pitying eyes. Not for Paul's coworkers with their awkward condolences. Not for anyone. But then she heard it. A child's voice. High-pitched. Impatient. "Mommy, is this the house? Mommy, I'm tired." Catherine's body went cold. Hey, beautiful souls, welcome back. If you're watching from your living room, your lunch break, or somewhere you probably shouldn't be on your phone, drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. And listen, if you haven't subscribed yet, do that right now, because what you're about to hear is going to shake you to your core. This is a story about betrayal, secrets, and a truth so devastating it'll make you question everything. So buckle up. Let's get into it. Catherine sat up slowly, her heart pounding in her chest like a trapped bird. She wasn't expecting anyone, especially not anyone with a child. She dragged herself out of bed, her limbs heavy with exhaustion and something darker, dread, maybe. She didn't bother looking in the mirror, didn't care that her bonnet was half off, that her eyes were swollen from crying, that she looked like death itself. When she opened the door, the sunlight burned her eyes. And standing on her porch was a woman she'd never seen before. Mid-30s. Honey brown skin. Neat box braids pulled into a low bun. She was holding the hand of a small boy, maybe 6 years old, with a yellow backpack hanging off his tiny shoulders. Behind them, a little girl, no older than 4, clutched a stuffed bunny and stared up at Catherine with wide, curious eyes. "Can I help you?" Catherine's voice came out hoarse, broken. The woman's face was pale, nervous. She looked like she might throw up. "Are you Catherine?" the woman asked quietly. Catherine's stomach dropped. "Who's asking?" The woman swallowed hard. Her hands were shaking. "My name is Mary. Mary Rizzi." The name meant nothing. "I'm sorry," Mary continued, her voice cracking. I know the timing is terrible, but I didn't know when else to." "Lady, I don't know you," Catherine said, her patience razor-thin. "And I just buried my husband 4 days ago, so unless you're here to tell me something that matters, I need you to." "Daddy said she'd be nice," the little boy said suddenly. Catherine froze. Her breath caught in her throat. "What did you just say?" The boy looked up at her with big, bright eyes. "My daddy. He said the kind lady lives here." "Is that you?" Catherine's knees went weak. She gripped the doorframe to keep from falling. "Your daddy?" Mary's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, Catherine. But we need to talk. It's about Paul." The world tilted. Paul. Her Paul. "What about him?" Catherine whispered. Mary glanced down at the children, then back up at Catherine. Her voice dropped to barely a breath. "These are his children." The words didn't land. Not at first. They hovered in the air like poison, like smoke, like something her brain refused to process. "That's not funny," Catherine said, shaking her head. "That's sick. I don't know who you are, but you need to leave. Now." "I have the birth certificates," Mary said quickly, desperately. She reached into her purse with trembling hands. "I have photos. I have bank statements." "Catherine, I swear to you, I didn't want to come here like this. But his family, they told me I had to. They said it was time." Catherine's heart was hammering so hard, she thought it might crack her ribs. She looked down at the little boy. Really looked at him. The slope of his nose. The deep-set eyes. The dimples in his cheeks, where he shifted his weight nervously from foot to foot. Paul's dimples. No. She looked at the little girl. Hazel eyes. Exact shade. The same rare, golden brown that Paul's mother used to brag about, saying it ran in the Corleone bloodline like a birthright. Catherine's vision blurred. "No," she breathed. "No, no, no." And that's when the cars pulled up. 3 of them. Black SUVs. Slow and deliberate, like a funeral procession. Paul's family. His mother, Dorothy Corleone, stepped out first, immaculate in black, her face unreadable, her eyes sharp as glass. Behind her, Paul's 2 brothers and their wives. His uncle, his cousins, all of them, staring at Catherine. Not with sadness. Not with sympathy. With satisfaction. Dorothy walked up the driveway with the confidence of someone who owned it. She looked at Mary and the children, then at Catherine, and her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I see you've met them," Dorothy said coolly. Catherine couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. "We tried to tell Paul to do this the right way," Dorothy continued, smoothing her leather gloves. "But he was weak. Always so weak when it came to you. She said the word you like it tasted rotten. So now we're doing it for him." "Doing what?" Catherine's voice cracked. Dorothy's eyes glittered. "Cleaning up his mess. And claiming what's ours. Drop a comment right now if you already feel the rage building. Because, trust me, you haven't seen anything yet." Catherine's world had always been small, and she'd liked it that way. It was just her and Paul. That's all it had ever needed to be. 15 years ago, she'd met him at a community fundraiser in Chicago. He was the awkward guy in the corner nursing a ginger ale, trying to avoid small talk. She'd been dragged there by her college roommate and was equally miserable. They'd locked eyes across the room, shared a look that said, "Rescue me," and ended up talking on the back steps for 4 hours straight. Paul Corleone wasn't flashy. He didn't have his family's sharp edges or his mother's cold ambition. He was gentle, funny in a self-deprecating way. He worked as a civil engineer and talked about bridges like they were poetry. He listened when Catherine spoke about her dreams of opening her own event planning business, and he didn't flinch when she told him about her complicated relationship with her own family. He made her feel seen. 3 months later, he proposed with a simple silver band and a promise. "I choose you. Every day. For the rest of my life." And she'd believed him. God, she believed him. They got married in a small ceremony. Her side of the church was sparse. His side was overflowing with Corleones who looked at Catherine like she was a temporary inconvenience. Dorothy Corleone had made it clear from day one that Paul was marrying beneath himself, that Catherine, a black woman from the South Side with a public university degree and no family money, wasn't what she'd envisioned for her eldest son. But Paul had stood firm. He'd told his mother to keep her opinions to herself. He'd chosen Catherine, and that had been enough. For a while. The cracks started 3 years into the marriage, when Catherine's period was late, and they'd held their breath, hoping. The test came back negative. Then negative again. And again. A year of trying became 2. 2 became 5. The doctor's appointments blurred together. The treatments. The hope that turned into heartbreak every single month. And through it all, Paul held her hand, kissed her tears away, told her she was enough. But his family didn't see it that way. "Baron," Dorothy had hissed one Thanksgiving, loud enough for Catherine to hear from the kitchen. "That's what she is. My son's legacy dies with him, because of her." Paul had grabbed Catherine's coat and walked out. They didn't speak to his family for 6 months after that. But the damage was done. Catherine had started to feel it, like a weight pressing on her chest every time she saw a pregnant woman, every time a friend announced a baby shower. She felt broken, incomplete, like she was failing the one man who'd ever loved her unconditionally. When the final diagnosis came, premature ovarian failure, 0 chance of conception, Catherine had locked herself in the bathroom and sobbed until she dry-heaved. Paul had broken down the door. Not because he was angry, because he was terrified. He'd found her curled on the tile floor, and he'd dropped to his knees beside her. "Baby, look at me," he'd whispered, tilting her face up. "Look at me." Her eyes were swollen, her voice raw. "I can't give you children, Paul. I can't give you what your family wants. What you want." "Stop," he'd said firmly, tears streaking his own face. "You think I care about that? You think I need some baby to validate us? Catherine, you're my family.
You. Just you.
That's all I've ever needed. But your mom. To hell with my mom, he'd said, and he'd meant it. I don't care what she thinks. I don't care what anyone thinks. You are enough. We are enough. And she'd believed him. She'd clung to those words like a lifeline for the next 7 years. Even when Dorothy's comments got sharper. Even when Paul's brothers started having kids. Loud, messy family gatherings where Catherine felt like a ghost. Even when Paul started taking more business trips, coming home exhausted and distant, she told herself it was just stress. Just work. He still kissed her goodnight. Still called her from the road to say he missed her. Still left notes on the counter that said, "Love you more today than yesterday." She believed every word. And now, standing on her porch with a woman and 2 children who had Paul's face, Catherine realized she'd been living in a lie so complete, so carefully constructed, that the truth felt like a building collapsing on top of her. Dorothy stepped closer, her voice sharp and deliberate. Paul supported these children financially for years. The boy is 6. The girl is 4. Both born during your marriage. Catherine's breath hitched. The properties, Dorothy continued, pulling a folder from her purse, were never put in your name. Paul made sure of that. Smart boy. He knew bloodline mattered, even if he pretended otherwise to keep you happy. That's not. Catherine's voice broke. Paul wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Dorothy's smile was venomous. Wouldn't lie to you? Wouldn't protect his legacy? Wouldn't do what needed to be done when you failed him? The word failed hit like a slap. Mary stepped forward, her face stricken. Mrs. Corleone, that's not fair. Stay out of this, Dorothy snapped. Then, to Catherine, you have 24 hours to vacate the property. The house belongs to Paul's estate now, and the estate belongs to his children, his real heirs. Catherine felt her knees buckle. One of Paul's brothers caught her elbow, not out of kindness, but to steady her enough to shove a manila envelope into her hands. Eviction notice, he said flatly. Signed by the estate lawyer. She stared at the envelope. This couldn't be real. This was a nightmare. A sick, twisted nightmare she'd wake up from any second. But the little boy was still staring at her with Paul's dimples. And the little girl was still holding that bunny with Paul's hazel eyes. And Dorothy was still smiling. Oh, and Catherine? Dorothy added, turning back toward her SUV. Don't bother contacting Paul's lawyer. He's our family lawyer. Has been for 30 years. The cars pulled away one by one, slow and triumphant, leaving Catherine standing on the porch she'd painted 2 summers ago, in the house she'd called home for a decade, with a woman and 2 children who were proof that her entire life had been a lie. Mary was crying now, softly, her hands shaking as she tried to pull the children back toward her car. I'm sorry, she whispered again. I'm so sorry. Catherine couldn't respond.
Her voice was gone.
Her body was numb. The little boy tugged on Mary's sleeve. Mommy, why is the kind lady crying? Catherine's heart splintered. She turned and walked back inside. Closed the door. Slid down to the floor. And screamed. Catherine didn't know how long she sat there on the floor, her back against the door, her body racked with sobs that came from somewhere so deep she thought they might tear her apart. The house was silent except for her crying. His house. No, not his. Not anymore. Not hers either. Never hers. She looked around the living room through blurred vision, at the couch they'd picked out together, the bookshelves Paul had built by hand, the framed photo on the mantel of their 10th anniversary trip to Savannah. She'd thought this was her life, her home, but she'd been living in a set piece, a stage, a carefully constructed illusion. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dorothy's lawyer. Removal service arriving 11 a.m. tomorrow. Please have your personal belongings ready for departure. Any items left behind will be discarded. Catherine's stomach lurched. She barely made it to the bathroom before she threw up. By 6 p.m., she'd packed a single suitcase. She didn't know where she was going. Maybe a hotel. Maybe her cousin's place in Gary, though she hadn't spoken to Shanice in 2 years. Maybe she'd just sleep in her car. She stood in the bedroom, their bedroom, staring at the bed she'd shared with Paul for 15 years, and felt a wave of rage so intense it scared her. "How could you?" she whispered to the empty room. "How could you do this to me?" But Paul wasn't there to answer. Paul was gone. And the only thing he'd left behind was devastation. She zipped the suitcase, grabbed her purse, and walked out the front door for what she thought would be the last time. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It would have been beautiful if Catherine could feel anything besides grief and fury. She sat down on the curb, suitcase beside her, and put her head in her hands. She had nowhere to go. No family to call. No children to fight for. No claim to anything. Paul's family had made sure of that. She was about to pull out her phone to search for nearby motels when she heard footsteps. Catherine. She looked up. Mary Rizzi stood a few feet away, alone. The children were gone, probably in the car parked down the street. Catherine's jaw tightened. "What do you want?" Mary's face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. "I know you hate me. I know you have every right to. You don't know anything about me," Catherine snapped, standing up. "You show up at my door with his children, you blow up my entire life, and now you want to have a conversation?
Get away from me."
"I didn't want to do this." Mary's voice cracked, desperation bleeding through. "I never wanted to do this. But they made me." "They? His family?" "Yes." Mary stepped closer, her hands trembling. "Dorothy called me 3 days ago. She told me if I didn't come here today, if I didn't bring the kids, she'd make sure I never saw another dime of support. She said it was time to set things right. She wanted you to see them. She wanted you to hurt." Catherine's chest tightened. "Well, congratulations. Mission accomplished. I didn't know about you," Mary said, tears streaming down her face now. "Not for years. Paul told me he was divorced. He said his family was overbearing, but he'd handled it. I didn't find out he was still married until I was already pregnant with Ethan." The little boy's name landed like a stone in Catherine's chest. "And you stayed." Catherine's voice was cold. "You knew he had a wife and you stayed?" "I tried to leave." Mary's voice rose, breaking. "But Dorothy found out. She showed up at my apartment and told me I was carrying the Corleone heir. She said if I left, she'd destroy me. She'd take my son, tie me up in court for years, ruin me financially. She said Paul didn't need to love me. He just needed to do his duty." Catherine felt sick. "She orchestrated this?" "She pushed him into it," Mary whispered. "Paul never wanted kids with me. He cried the night Ethan was born. He kept saying he was sorry, that this wasn't supposed to happen, that he'd ruined everything." "Stop." Catherine's voice shook. "I don't want to hear this." "I know you don't believe me," Mary said quickly. "I know you think I'm just some homewrecker trying to justify myself. But Paul told me the truth before he died." Catherine froze. "What are you talking about?" Mary reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. It was cream-colored, expensive stationery, and written across the front in Paul's unmistakable handwriting. "For Catherine. To be opened only if something happens to me." Catherine's breath caught. "He gave this to me 2 weeks before the plane crash," Mary said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He said if anything ever happened to him, I had to make sure you got it. He said his family would come after you. He said they'd try to take everything." Catherine stared at the envelope like it might explode. "He knew," she breathed. "He knew they'd do this?" "He was terrified of them," Mary said. "He was trying to protect you. He ran out of time." Catherine's hands shook as she took the envelope. It was sealed with red wax. Paul's initials pressed into it. "There's more," Mary said quietly. "Inside my car. Documents. Financial records. Voice notes Paul recorded. He was building a case, Catherine. He was going to cut them off. He was going to make sure you were protected." "Why?" Catherine's voice cracked. "Why would you help me? I'm nothing to you." Mary's eyes filled with fresh tears. "Because Paul loved you. I saw it every time he said your name. And because his family used both of us like we were nothing. I'm done being their pawn." Catherine looked down at the envelope in her hands. For a moment, she considered throwing it away, burning it. She didn't want to hear Paul's excuses, didn't want his justifications or his apologies. But her fingers were already sliding under the seal. The wax cracked. She pulled out 2 pages, handwritten in Paul's careful script, and she began to read. My dearest Catherine, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm so sorry. I don't know how to start this except to say, you deserved better than me. You deserved a man who was strong enough to stand up to his family. A man who chose you every single day, without compromise. I failed you. I need you to know the truth, not the version my mother will tell you, but the real truth. I never wanted children with Mary. I never loved her. What happened between us was orchestrated by my mother after you got your diagnosis. She told me I was killing the family legacy by staying with you. She said if I didn't produce an heir, she'd cut me off completely, destroy your business prospects, make sure you'd never work in this city again. I thought I could manage it. I thought I could keep you safe and keep them satisfied. I was a coward and a fool. Mary got pregnant. My mother was triumphant. And I fell apart. I've been trying to fix this for 3 years, Catherine. I've been gathering evidence, proof of my mother's manipulation, financial records showing the properties were meant for you, recordings of her threatening both me and Mary. I was going to file legal documents the week I got back from Denver. I was going to transfer everything into your name, set up a trust that she couldn't touch, and cut off my family completely. I was coming home to you.
For real this time.
No more lies. But if you're reading this, I didn't make it home. The documents you need are in a safe deposit box at First National Bank, box number 4429.
The key is with Mary.
She'll give it to you. Use them. Fight them. Don't let my mother take what's yours. You are the love of my life, Catherine Tessio. You always have been. I'm so sorry I wasn't brave enough to protect you while I was alive. Please forgive me.
Paul.
Catherine's hands were shaking so hard the letter fluttered like a leaf. She read it again, then a 3rd time. Her grief twisted into something sharper, hotter.
Rage.
Paul had known. He'd known what they'd do. He'd try to stop it.
And he'd failed.
But he'd left her a weapon. She looked up at Mary, who was watching her with wide, frightened eyes. The key, Catherine said, her voice steady now.
Cold.
You have it. Mary nodded quickly, pulling a small silver key from her pocket. Everything's in there. Financial documents. Recorded conversations. Proof of the property transfers he was planning. He even has a signed affidavit from a family lawyer who is willing to testify about Dorothy's coercion. Catherine took the key. For the first time in 4 days, she felt something other than despair. She felt power. They think they've won, Catherine said quietly, almost to herself. They think I'm just going to disappear. What are you going to do? Mary asked. Catherine looked at the house, her house, and then at the letter in her hands. She folded it carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. I'm going to bury them. Catherine didn't know how long she sat there on the floor, her back against the door, her body racked with sobs that came from somewhere so deep she thought they might tear her apart. The house was silent except for her crying. His house. No, not his. Not anymore. Not hers either. Never hers. She looked around the living room through blurred vision, at the couch they'd picked out together, the bookshelves Paul had built by hand, the framed photo on the mantel of their 10th anniversary trip to Savannah. She'd thought this was her life, her home. But she'd been living in a set piece, a stage, a carefully constructed illusion. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dorothy's lawyer. Removal service arriving 11 a.m. tomorrow. Please have your personal belongings ready for departure. Any items left behind will be discarded. Catherine's stomach lurched. She barely made it to the bathroom before she threw up. By 6 p.m., she'd packed a single suitcase. She didn't know where she was going. Maybe a hotel. Maybe her cousin's place in Gary, though she hadn't spoken to Shanice in 2 years. Maybe she'd just sleep in her car. She stood in the bedroom, their bedroom, staring at the bed she'd shared with Paul for 15 years, and felt a wave of rage, so intense it scared her. How could you? She whispered to the empty room. How could you do this to me? But Paul wasn't there to answer.
Paul was gone.
And the only thing he'd left behind was devastation. She zipped the suitcase, grabbed her purse, and walked out the front door for what she thought would be the last time. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It would have been beautiful if Catherine could feel anything besides grief and fury. She sat down on the curb, suitcase beside her, and put her head in her hands. She had nowhere to go. No family to call. No children to fight for. No claim to anything. Paul's family had made sure of that. She was about to pull out her phone to search for nearby motels when she heard footsteps. Catherine. She looked up. Mary Rizzi stood a few feet away, alone. The children were gone, probably in the car park down the street. Catherine's jaw tightened. What do you want? Mary's face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. I know you hate me. I know you have every right to. You don't know anything about me, Catherine snapped, standing up. You show up at my door with his children, you blow up my entire life, and now you want to have a conversation? Get away from me. I didn't want to do this. Mary's voice cracked, desperation bleeding through. I never wanted to do this. But they made me.
They?
His family? Yes. Mary stepped closer, her hands trembling. Dorothy called me 3 days ago. She told me if I didn't come here today, if I didn't bring the kids, she'd make sure I never saw another dime of support. She said it was time to set things right. She wanted you to see them. She wanted you to hurt. Catherine's chest tightened. Well, congratulations. Mission accomplished. I didn't know about you, Mary said, tears streaming down her face now. Not for years.
Paul told me he was divorced.
He said his family was overbearing, but he'd handled it. I didn't find out he was still married until I was already pregnant with Ethan. The little boy's name landed like a stone in Catherine's chest. And you stayed. Catherine's voice was cold. You knew he had a wife and you stayed? I tried to leave. Mary's voice rose, breaking. But Dorothy found out. She showed up at my apartment and told me I was carrying the Corleone heir. She said if I left, she'd destroy me. She'd take my son, tie me up in court for years, ruin me financially. She said Paul didn't need to love me. He just needed to do his duty. Catherine felt sick. She orchestrated this? She pushed him into it, Mary whispered. Paul never wanted kids with me. He cried the night Ethan was born. He kept saying he was sorry, that this wasn't supposed to happen, that he'd ruined everything. Stop. Catherine's voice shook. I don't want to hear this. I know you don't believe me, Mary said quickly. I know you think I'm just some homewrecker trying to justify myself. But Paul told me the truth before he died. Catherine froze. What are you talking about? Mary reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. It was cream-colored, expensive stationery, and written across the front in Paul's unmistakable handwriting. For Catherine. To be opened only if something happens to me. Catherine's breath caught. He gave this to me 2 weeks before the plane crash, Mary said, her voice barely above a whisper. He said if anything ever happened to him, I had to make sure you got it. He said his family would come after you. He said they'd try to take everything. Catherine stared at the envelope like it might explode. He knew, she breathed. He knew they'd do this? He was terrified of them, Mary said. He was trying to protect you. He ran out of time. Catherine's hands shook as she took the envelope. It was sealed with red wax. Paul's initials pressed into it. There's more, Mary said quietly. Inside my car. Documents. Financial records. Voice notes Paul recorded. He was building a case, Catherine. He was going to cut them off. He was going to make sure you were protected. Why? Catherine's voice cracked. Why would you help me? I'm nothing to you. Mary's eyes filled with fresh tears. Because Paul loved you. I saw it every time he said your name. And because his family used both of us like we were nothing. I'm done being their pawn. Catherine looked down at the envelope in her hands. For a moment, she considered throwing it away. Burning it. She didn't want to hear Paul's excuses. Didn't want his justifications or his apologies. But her fingers were already sliding under the seal. The wax cracked. She pulled out 2 pages, handwritten in Paul's careful script, and she began to read. My dearest Catherine. She read it again, then a third time. Her grief twisted into something sharper, hotter.
Rage.
Paul had known.
He'd known what they'd do.
He'd tried to stop it, and he'd failed. But he'd left her a weapon. She looked up at Mary, who was watching her with wide, frightened eyes. The key, Catherine said, her voice steady now.
Cold.
You have it. Mary nodded quickly, pulling a small silver key from her pocket. Everything's in there. Financial documents. Recorded conversations. Proof of the property transfers he was planning. He even has a signed affidavit from a family lawyer who is willing to testify about Dorothy's coercion. Catherine took the key. For the first time in 4 days, she felt something other than despair. She felt power. They think they've won, Catherine said quietly, almost to herself. They think I'm just going to disappear. What are you going to do? Mary asked. Catherine looked at the house, her house, and then at the letter in her hands. She folded it carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. I'm going to bury them. Catherine didn't sleep that night. She sat in a Holiday Inn Express on the outskirts of the city, the silver key clutched in her hand, Paul's letter spread out on the scratchy comforter beside her. She read it over and over until the words blurred together. I was a coward and a fool. You deserved better than me. Please forgive me. Part of her wanted to forgive him. The part that remembered his laugh, his gentle hands, the way he'd slow dance with her in the kitchen when no one was watching. But another part, the part that had just been thrown out of her own home, the part that had looked into the eyes of his children and felt her world collapse, that part wanted to scream at him, rage at him, demand answers he'd never be able to give. By 8 a.m., she'd made her decision. She wasn't going to crumble. She wasn't going to disappear quietly like Dorothy Corleone expected. She was going to fight. First National Bank opened at 9 a.m. Catherine was waiting outside the doors when the manager unlocked them, Mary Rizzi standing nervously beside her. The alliance was strange, uncomfortable. Even. Catherine couldn't look at Mary without seeing those children, without feeling the knife twist of betrayal. But Mary had the key, and more importantly, she had information Catherine needed. Box 4429, Catherine told the bank manager, a middle-aged white man with thin-framed glasses who kept glancing between the two women like he was trying to solve a puzzle. He led them into the vault, used both Catherine's ID and the key to open the box, and left them alone in a small private room. Catherine's hands trembled as she lifted the metal lid. Inside was a thick accordion folder, stuffed to bursting. She pulled it out carefully and opened it on the table. Financial records. Spreadsheets showing monthly wire transfers from Paul's business account to Mary's rent, utilities, childcare. But also, highlighted in yellow, transfers to a separate account labeled K, Tessio Trust, pending. Tens of thousands of dollars Paul had been setting aside specifically for Catherine. Property deeds. The house, a rental property in Evanston, and a small commercial space in Lincoln Park, all with sticky notes in Paul's handwriting. Transfer to Catherine in progress. Recorded conversations. A small digital recorder with files labeled by date. Catherine pressed play on the first one. Paul's voice filled the tiny room, and Catherine's chest constricted. Mom, I'm not doing this anymore. Dorothy's cold reply. You don't have a choice, Paul. That woman can't give you children. Mary can. You want your name to mean something? You want your legacy to survive? Then you do what needs to be done. I love Catherine. Love doesn't build legacies. Blood does. Catherine's hand flew to her mouth. Mary looked away, tears sliding down her face. There were 6 more recordings, each one more damning than the last. Dorothy threatening to disinherit Paul if he didn't do his duty. Paul's brother joking about Catherine being a placeholder wife. Dorothy explicitly saying, when you're gone, Paul, we'll handle her.
Don't worry about that.
Catherine stopped the playback, her whole body shaking with rage. She planned this, Catherine whispered. She's been planning to destroy me for years. I told you, Mary said quietly. She's evil, Catherine. She doesn't see people. She only sees chess pieces. At the bottom of the folder was a handwritten affidavit from a lawyer named Gerald Marks, stating that he witnessed Dorothy Corleone coercing her son into maintaining a secondary family against his will, and that Paul Corleone had intended to legally sever ties with his birth family and secure all assets for his wife, Catherine Tessio. It was notarized, dated 1 week before Paul died. "This is it," Catherine breathed. "This is everything I need." Mary nodded. "So, what do we do now?" "We find a lawyer," Catherine said, her voice steady. "A good one." Turned out, finding a lawyer willing to go up against the Corleone family was harder than Catherine expected. The first attorney she contacted, recommended by a former coworker, took one look at the case and politely declined. "The Corleones have deep pockets and deeper connections. I'm sorry, Mrs. Tessio. I can't help you." The second lawyer didn't even let her finish explaining before cutting her off. "I've worked with Dorothy Corleone's legal team before. You don't want this fight. Trust me." By the third rejection, Catherine was ready to throw her phone across the room. But Mary had been making calls too. "I found someone," she said, meeting Catherine at a coffee shop in Hyde Park that afternoon. "Her name is Sutton Lowe. She's a bulldog. Took on a megachurch in a fraud case last year and won. She doesn't scare easy." Catherine looked up. "Will she see me?" "She'll see us," Mary corrected. "I called her this morning. Told her the basics. She wants to meet tomorrow." Sutton Lowe's office was in a modest building on the south side. Nothing fancy, but clean and professional. The woman herself was in her mid-40s, black, with natural hair pulled into a high puff and sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She listened to Catherine's story without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes on a legal pad. When Catherine finished, Sutton leaned back in her chair and exhaled slowly. "This is a monster of a case," she said bluntly. "The Corleones are connected. They've got money, political ties, and a legal team that's used to winning. If we do this, it's going to get ugly." "I don't care," Catherine said. Sutton's eyes narrowed. "They're going to come after your credibility. Dig into your past. Try to paint you as a gold digger, an opportunist, someone who didn't deserve Paul in the first place. Let them try. They'll drag this out. Tie you up in court for months, maybe years. Burn through your savings." Catherine's jaw tightened. "I have nothing to burn through. They already took everything." Sutton studied her for a long moment. Then she looked at Mary. "And you? You're willing to testify against them? You know they'll tear you apart." Mary swallowed hard but nodded. "I'm tired of being scared. And I'm tired of letting them use my children as weapons." Sutton tapped her pen against the desk, thinking. Finally, she smiled, sharp and fierce. "All right, let's burn their house down. If you've ever wanted to see justice served to people who thought they were untouchable, drop a comment. And if you're loving Catherine's comeback arc, make sure you're subscribed, because it's about to get even better." The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. Sutton filed an emergency injunction to halt the eviction, citing improper transfer of assets and evidence of elder abuse and coercion. It bought Catherine time, but not much. Dorothy's legal team fired back immediately with a motion to dismiss, arguing that Catherine had no legal standing to contest the estate. The first hearing was set for the following week. In the meantime, Dorothy escalated. Catherine started getting calls. Anonymous, threatening, telling her to let it go or face consequences. Someone slashed her tires in the hotel parking lot. A brick came through Mary's apartment window with a note, "Drop it or lose your kids." Sutton reported everything to the police, but without proof of who was behind it, there was nothing they could do. "They're trying to scare you," Sutton said during a late-night strategy session in her office. "Classic intimidation tactics. The question is, are you going to let them?" Catherine looked at the photos of Paul she'd brought with her. The ones where he looked happy. The ones where his smile reached his eyes. "No," she said firmly. "I'm not backing down." The night before the hearing, Catherine couldn't sleep again. She sat in the hotel room, staring at Paul's letter, and let herself cry for the man she'd loved, the one who'd been too weak to save her, but who'd tried anyway. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mary. "The kids asked about you today. Ethan wanted to know if you're okay." Catherine's throat tightened. She didn't know how to feel about those children. They were innocent in all this. Puppets in Dorothy's sick game, just like Mary had been, just like Paul had been. But they had his face. His eyes. And that still hurt. She texted back. Tell them I'm fine. Thank you. A moment later, another text. We're going to win this, Catherine. I feel it. Catherine wanted to believe her. But as she turned off the light and tried to sleep, all she could think about was Dorothy's cold, satisfied smile. And the battle that was coming. The courtroom was smaller than Catherine had imagined. Cook County Circuit Court, Division 5. Fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. Wooden benches that smelled like old varnish and decades of legal battles. Catherine sat beside Sutton Lowe at the plaintiff's table, her hands folded tightly in her lap to keep them from shaking. Across the aisle, Dorothy Corleone sat like a queen holding court. Designer black suit, pearls, perfectly styled silver hair. Her legal team, 3 attorneys in matching navy suits, flanked her like an army. She didn't even glance in Catherine's direction. Mary sat in the gallery behind Catherine, clutching her purse. She'd left the children with a babysitter, afraid of what might happen in this room. Judge Patricia Carmichael entered, a black woman in her 60s with steel-gray locks and reading glasses perched on her nose. She had a reputation for being fair but unforgiving of anyone who wasted her time. Let's get started, Judge Carmichael said, settling into her chair. This is a hearing on the emergency injunction filed by Mrs. Catherine Tessio to halt eviction proceedings and contest the distribution of her late husband's estate. Counselors, make it quick and make it clear. Sutton stood, buttoning her blazer. Your Honor, my client was unlawfully evicted from her marital home by her late husband's family, who falsely claimed she had no legal right to the property. We have evidence, substantial evidence, that Paul Corleone intended to transfer all marital assets to Mrs. Tessio before his untimely death, and that his family has engaged in fraud and coercion to prevent that transfer. Dorothy's lead attorney, a silver-haired man named Victor Strachey, rose smoothly. Your Honor, this is a desperate attempt by Mrs. Tessio to claim assets she has no legal right to. Mr. Corleone's estate was never formally transferred to her name. The properties in question were held in trust by the Corleone family, and upon Mr. Corleone's death, they rightfully reverted to the family estate. Mrs. Tessio is, unfortunately, grasping at straws. Grasping at straws? Sutton's voice sharpened. Your Honor, we have financial records, recorded conversations, and a notarized affidavit from an independent attorney confirming Paul Corleone's intentions. We also have evidence that Mrs. Dorothy Corleone coerced her son into maintaining a secret second family specifically because she disapproved of his legal wife. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Carmichael raised an eyebrow. That's a serious accusation, Ms. Lowe. It's a serious case, Your Honor. Victor Strachey's expression didn't change. Intentions are not the same as legal actions, Your Honor. Mr. Corleone may have wanted to transfer assets, but he never completed the process. Legally, the estate defaults to bloodline heirs, which includes his 2 biological children. Catherine's stomach twisted. Sutton pulled out a folder. Your Honor, we'd like to submit Exhibit A, financial records showing Mr. Corleone systematically setting aside funds in a trust specifically labeled for Catherine Tessio. Exhibit B, property documents with written notes indicating transfer instructions. And Exhibit C. Your Honor, Victor interrupted, none of these documents are legally binding. They're notes and intentions. The law requires proper execution. Let her finish, Mr. Strachey, Judge Carmichael said coolly. Sutton continued. Exhibit C, recorded conversations between Paul Corleone and his mother, Dorothy Corleone, in which she explicitly threatens to disinherit him and deal with Catherine Tessio after his death. She pressed play on a small speaker. Dorothy's voice filled the courtroom, cold and clear. When you're gone, Paul, we'll handle her.
Don't worry about that.
She'll be out of that house, so fast, she won't know what hit her. Catherine watched Dorothy's face. For the first time, a crack appeared in her perfect composure. Her jaw tightened. Judge Carmichael leaned forward. Is that you on the recording, Mrs. Corleone? Dorothy's lawyer whispered something to her. She nodded stiffly. Yes, Your Honor, but it's taken out of context. I'll determine context, the judge said. Continue, Ms. Lowe. Sutton took a breath. Your Honor, we believe the Corleone family has engaged in a calculated campaign to defraud Catherine Tessio of her legal rights. But what we discovered 2 days ago takes this case to another level entirely. Catherine's pulse quickened. Sutton hadn't told her about any new discovery. Sutton pulled out another document, this one in a sealed evidence bag. This is a certified property transfer deed, filed with the Cook County Recorder's Office on February 14th of this year, 2 days before Paul Corleone's death. The courtroom went silent. Victor Strachey's face went pale. According to this document, Sutton continued, her voice rising, Paul Corleone did execute the transfer. The house at 4892 Maple Street, the rental property in Evanston, and the commercial space in Lincoln Park were all legally transferred into Catherine Tessio's name. This deed was filed, stamped, and recorded. That's impossible, Victor stammered, standing abruptly. We conducted a full record search. And somehow you missed this? Sutton's eyes were fierce. Or did you find it and bury it? Your Honor, this is outrageous. Judge Carmichael held up a hand. Mr. Strachey, did your team conduct a title search? Yes, Your Honor, of course. And did this document appear in that search? Victor hesitated. I'll need to consult with my associates. That sounds like a no, the judge said dryly. She turned to Sutton. How did you obtain this? We filed our own independent title search through a third-party firm, Sutton said. This document was in the public record, right where it should be. The question is, why didn't the Corleone family attorneys find it? Or did they find it and intentionally withhold it from these proceedings? The courtroom erupted. Judge Carmichael banged her gavel. Order. I want answers, Mr. Strachey, and I want them now. Victor was whispering frantically with his team. Finally, a younger associate passed him a folder. His face went ashen as he read. Your Honor, he said slowly, it appears there was an administrative oversight. An oversight? Sutton's voice dripped with disbelief. A legal property transfer just slipped through your fingers? Catherine's heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. Paul had done it. He'd actually done it. He'd transferred everything to her before he died, which meant Dorothy had known, had to have known, and she'd lied anyway. Judge Carmichael's expression was stone. Ms. Lowe, do you have certified copies of this deed? Right here, Your Honor. Sutton handed them over. The judge examined them carefully, then looked at Dorothy Corleone with something that might have been discussed. Mrs. Corleone, did you know about this transfer? Dorothy's face was a mask, but her eyes were blazing. Your Honor, I trusted my legal team to handle. That's not what I asked. Did you know your son had transferred these properties to his wife? Silence. Dorothy's attorney leaned in, whispered urgently. I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, Dorothy said flatly. The courtroom exploded again. Catherine felt like she might pass out. Judge Carmichael banged the gavel 3 more times. Order. Mr. Strachey, I'm giving you 24 hours to explain how your team overlooked a legally filed property deed. And Mrs. Corleone, you may want to consult with a criminal attorney, because if I find out you knowingly suppressed legal documents to defraud Mrs. Tessio, you're looking at fraud charges. She turned to Catherine. Mrs. Tessio, based on the evidence presented, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order preventing the Corleone family from taking any further action regarding the disputed properties. You are to be reinstated in your home immediately. We'll reconvene in 2 weeks for a full hearing. The gavel came down with a final, decisive crack. Catherine couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Sutton grabbed her hand and squeezed. We did it. We actually did it. Behind them, Mary was crying, her hands over her mouth. Across the aisle, Dorothy Corleone stood slowly, her face a mask of pure venom. She looked directly at Catherine for the first time, and smiled. It wasn't a smile of defeat. It was a smile that said, "This isn't over." Outside the courthouse, Catherine leaned against a pillar and finally let herself breathe. "Paul did it," she whispered. "He actually protected me." "He tried," Sutton corrected gently. "But his family almost stole it anyway. If we hadn't dug deeper."
Catherine didn't want to think about that.
Mary approached hesitantly. "Catherine, I'm so glad. You deserve this." Catherine looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd been used as a pawn just like she had. This woman who'd had the courage to stand up and tell the truth. "Thank you," Catherine said quietly, "for bringing me that letter. For testifying. For being brave." Mary's eyes filled with tears. "I just want my kids to grow up knowing the truth. That their father wasn't a monster. That he was just trapped." Catherine nodded slowly. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Enjoy your victory while it lasts. You have no idea what you've started." Her blood ran cold. She showed it to Sutton, who frowned. "I'm forwarding this to the police. And Catherine, watch your back. Cornered animals are dangerous." Catherine looked back at the courthouse, where Dorothy Corleone was climbing into a Blacktown car, her face unreadable. And for the first time, Catherine wondered, just how far would Dorothy go to win? Catherine moved back into the house 3 days later. It should have felt like a victory. Should have felt like coming home. But the moment she stepped through the door, she knew something was wrong. The furniture was gone. All of it. The couch, the bookshelves Paul had built, the dining table where they'd shared 15 years of meals, stripped. Even the curtains had been torn down. The walls were bare. Nail holes where their wedding photos had hung. Empty spaces where memories used to live. They'd gutted it. Dorothy's final act of spite before the restraining order took effect. Catherine stood in the hollow living room and felt the tears come hot and fast. They hadn't just taken the furniture. They'd taken every piece of Paul that was left. Sutton had warned her this might happen. Legally, they can argue the furnishings were family heirlooms. Without an itemized inventory in the estate documents, it's hard to prove otherwise. But knowing it might happen and seeing it were two different things. Catherine sank to the bare floor and sobbed. The next blow came 2 days later. Catherine's bank account was frozen. She discovered it when her debit card was declined at the grocery store. Embarrassed, she called the bank from the parking lot, and the customer service rep explained that a lien had been placed on her account pending estate dispute resolution. "That's illegal," Catherine shouted into the phone. "I won in court." "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the lien was filed by the Corleone family estate attorneys. You'll need to speak with them directly." She called Sutton immediately. "They're retaliating," Sutton said, fury bleeding through her usually calm voice. "I'll file an emergency motion to unfreeze the account, but it's going to take a few days. Do you have cash?" "Another account." "I have maybe $200, Catherine said, her voice breaking. "That's it. Sit tight. I'll handle this." But a few days turned into a week. And in that week, everything unraveled. Catherine couldn't pay her phone bill. Service was suspended. She couldn't buy groceries. Started rationing the canned goods she'd brought from the hotel. She couldn't afford gas. Couldn't get to Sutton's office for strategy meetings. And worst of all, she was alone in that empty house, cut off from the world, with nothing but her grief and rage for company. She'd won the battle in court, but Dorothy was making sure she'd lose the war slowly. Painfully. On the 8th day, Catherine was sitting on the floor of the empty bedroom when she heard a knock at the door. She almost didn't answer. Didn't have the strength. But the knocking persisted. When she finally opened it, Mary stood there, holding 2 grocery bags and looking terrified. "I couldn't reach you," Mary said quickly. "Your phone's been off. I got worried." Catherine's defenses crumbled. "They froze my bank account. I can't afford anything." Mary's face crumpled. "Oh, Catherine?" She pushed past her, set the bags on the kitchen counter, the one thing the Corleones hadn't taken, and started unpacking. Bread, eggs, milk, canned soup, pasta. "Mary, I can't accept." "Stop," Mary said firmly. "You're not alone in this. I won't let you starve because of them." Catherine wanted to argue, but she was too tired, too broken. Instead, she whispered, "Thank you." But the worst was yet to come. That night, Catherine's laptop, her one remaining connection to the outside world, pinged with an email. The subject line made her stomach drop. "You should see what people are saying about you." She opened it. It was a link to a local news blog. The headline screamed, "Gold digger widow or grieving wife. The Catherine Tessio case divides Chicago." Her hands shook as she scrolled. Someone had leaked details of the case to the press. But not the real details. The story painted Catherine as an opportunistic woman who married into a wealthy family, failed to produce heirs, and was now trying to steal the estate from Paul's real children. There were photos of her, of Mary and the kids, of Dorothy looking dignified and heartbroken outside the courthouse. The comment section was a cesspool. She couldn't give him kids, so now she wants his money? Pathetic. Those poor children. Their father dies and this woman tries to steal their inheritance. Gold digger got caught. Catherine's vision blurred. They were destroying her. Not just financially, publicly. She clicked another link embedded in the email. A Facebook post from one of Dorothy's society friends shared hundreds of times. Praying for the Corleone family as they fight against a woman who only wants their money. Paul's legacy deserves better. #Justice for Paul. Catherine slammed the laptop shut and screamed. The final blow came the next morning. Sutton called from an unknown number. Catherine had managed to borrow a neighbor's phone. "Catherine, we have a problem." Her voice was tight, controlled, which meant it was bad. "What now?" Catherine asked, too numb to feel anything. "Gerald Marks, the lawyer who signed the affidavit supporting Paul's intentions, he's recanting his testimony." Catherine's heart stopped. "What?" "He filed a statement this morning saying he was mistaken about Paul's intentions, that he misinterpreted their conversations. Without his testimony, we lose a major piece of evidence." "They got to him," Catherine breathed. "Dorothy threatened him, or paid him off, or—" "I know," Sutton said. "But I can't prove it. And without proof, his recantation stands." "So, what does that mean?" Sutton hesitated. "It means our case just got a lot weaker. The property deed still stands, but Dorothy's team is going to argue that Paul was coerced or mentally unstable when he filed it. They're going to drag this out, Catherine. And they're going to make it hell." Catherine sank to the floor, the phone pressed to her ear. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," she whispered. "Catherine, I have no money, no food, no reputation left. They've taken everything, Sutton. And I'm so tired. I'm so tired." "Don't you dare give up," Sutton said fiercely. "That's exactly what they want. They want you broken. They want you to walk away. Don't give them that satisfaction." But as Catherine hung up and sat alone in that empty house, she wondered if Sutton was wrong. Maybe Dorothy had already won. Maybe fighting was pointless. Maybe she should just let go. She pulled Paul's letter from her pocket. She'd been carrying it everywhere and read it one more time. "Please forgive me. I don't know if I can," she whispered to the empty room. And for the first time since Paul died, Catherine wondered if love had ever been enough. Catherine didn't know how long she sat there on that empty floor, Paul's letter crumpled in her hand. Minutes. Hours. Time had stopped meaning anything. But then she heard it again, a knock at the door. Softer this time. Almost hesitant. She didn't move. "Catherine?" Mary's voice, muffled through the wood. "Please open the door. I know you're in there." Catherine closed her eyes. She didn't want to see anyone. Didn't want to pretend she was okay. "Catherine, I brought someone who wants to see you." A pause. Then a small voice. A child's voice. "Miss Catherine? Are you sad?" Catherine's breath caught. She stood slowly, her legs shaky, and opened the door. Mary stood there with both children. Ethan, the 6-year-old with Paul's dimples, was holding a drawing. Little Sophia clutched her stuffed bunny, her hazel eyes, Paul's eyes, wide and worried. "We made you something," Ethan said, holding up the paper. It was a crayon drawing of a house. A woman standing in front of it, the sun shining overhead. In a child's messy handwriting. "Don't be sad. Daddy loved you." Catherine's knees buckled. She grabbed the doorframe to steady herself. "The kids have been asking about you every day," Mary said quietly. "They wanted to come see if you were okay." Sophia stepped forward and held out her bunny. "You can hold Mr. Floppy. He makes me feel better when I'm sad." And that's when Catherine broke. Not with despair this time, with something else. Something stronger. These children were innocent. They didn't ask to be born into this mess. They didn't ask to be used as weapons in Dorothy's war. And Paul had loved them, despite everything.
Had supported them.
Had tried to protect both them and Catherine. She knelt down and took the bunny gently.
"Thank you, Sophia."
"That's very kind." Ethan stepped closer. "Mommy said Grandma Dorothy is being mean to you. She's mean to us too sometimes." Catherine looked up at Mary, who nodded, tears in her eyes. "She told the kids that if I kept helping you, she'd make sure I lost custody," Mary whispered. "She said she'd prove I was an unfit mother, that the children belonged with the real Corleone family." Catherine's blood turned to ice. "She threatened to take your children?" Mary nodded. "That's why I came. Catherine, I can't let her win. Not just for you, for them. If she gets control of Paul's estate, she'll use it to destroy both of us. She'll take my kids and erase you completely. We have to fight back. Together." Catherine looked down at the children, then at the drawing in her hand. "Daddy loved you. Paul had been weak, had been a coward in so many ways. But he'd also been a man trapped by a monster of a mother who'd controlled him his entire life. And in the end, he tried to break free. Tried to protect Catherine. He'd just run out of time. But Catherine hadn't. She stood slowly, something hardening in her chest. Something sharp and fierce. "You're right," she said, her voice steady for the first time in days. "We can't let her win." 2 hours later, Catherine sat in Sutton's office. She'd borrowed Mary's car, with a fury burning in her gut that felt like fuel. "Dorothy threatened Mary's children," Catherine said. "She's using them as leverage." Sutton's jaw tightened. "That's parental interference. If we can prove it." "We can," Mary said, pulling out her phone. "She sent me texts. Voicemails. I saved everything." She played one of the messages on speaker. Dorothy's cold, clipped voice. "Those children are Corleone blood, Mary. If you continue to side with that woman, I will petition for emergency custody and you will never see them again. Choose wisely." Sutton's eyes lit up. "That's a threat. That's actionable." "But it's not just about the custody threat," Catherine said, her mind racing. "Dorothy's entire case is built on the idea that Paul's children are his rightful heirs. That bloodline matters above everything else." "Right," Sutton said. So, what if we flip it?" Catherine leaned forward. "What if we prove that Dorothy never cared about Paul's happiness or his children's well-being, only about control? What if we show the court that she coerced Paul into this entire situation, manipulated Mary, and is now using innocent children as pawns?" Sutton nodded slowly. "We paint her as the villain, not the grieving grandmother." "Exactly," Catherine said. "And we have the evidence. The recordings of her threatening Paul. Her threats to Mary. The fact that she knowingly suppressed the property transfer deed. And Gerald Marks," Mary added suddenly. "The lawyer who recanted, he did it because Dorothy threatened him too." "I know it. Can you prove it?" Sutton asked. Mary hesitated. "Not directly. But his wife goes to my church. If I talk to her." "Do it," Catherine said. "We need him back on our side." Sutton grabbed a legal pad and started writing.
"Okay.
New strategy. We go on the offensive. File a countersuit against Dorothy for fraud, coercion, and emotional distress. We subpoena her financial records, see if there's any proof she paid off Gerald or anyone else. And we put Mary on the stand to testify about the threats." "She'll destroy me in cross-examination," Mary said, her voice shaking. "Not if we prepare you properly," Sutton said firmly. "You tell the truth. The whole truth.
How she manipulated you.
How she threatened your kids. The jury needs to see who Dorothy Corleone really is." Catherine reached over and squeezed Mary's hand. "We do this together. You're not alone anymore. Mary's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. That night, Catherine returned to the empty house, but this time, it felt different. It wasn't a tomb anymore. It was a fortress. She sat on the floor with Ethan's drawing taped to the bare wall and Paul's letter in her lap. I'm going to finish what you started, she whispered. I'm going to protect them. All of them. Her phone, reactivated thanks to Mary paying the bill, buzzed with a text from Sutton. Gerald Mark's wife just called me. She's willing to testify that Dorothy offered her husband $50,000 to recant. We've got her, Catherine. We've actually got her. Catherine read the message 3 times, her heart pounding. For the first time in weeks, she smiled. Dorothy Corleone had made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated the women she'd tried to destroy. And now, those women were coming for her. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread about the case. The wronged widow, the secret family, the society matriarch accused of fraud. Local news cameras lined the hallway outside, barred from entering but hungry for the outcome. Catherine sat beside Sutton, her spine straight, her hands steady. She'd worn her best dress, navy blue, simple, dignified. Paul's wedding ring still on her finger. Across the aisle, Dorothy Corleone sat surrounded by her legal team, but for the first time, she looked rattled. Her makeup was perfect, her suit impeccable, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of fear. Judge Carmichael entered, and the room fell silent. We're here for the full evidentiary hearing in Tessio versus Corleone estate, the judge said. Ms. Lowe, you may begin. Sutton stood, and Catherine felt a surge of pride. This woman had fought for her when no one else would. Your Honor, we're going to prove 3 things today, Sutton said, her voice ringing clear. 1. That Dorothy Corleone orchestrated a years-long campaign of coercion and manipulation against her own son. 2. That she knowingly suppressed legal documents to defraud Catherine Tessio. And 3. That she has threatened and intimidated witnesses to obstruct justice. Victor Strachey rose. Your Honor, these are wild accusations without. Save it for cross-examination, Mr. Strachey, Judge Carmichael said. Ms. Lowe, call your first witness. The plaintiff calls Mary Rizzi to the stand. Mary walked to the witness stand, trembling but resolute. After she was sworn in, Sutton approached gently. Ms. Rizzi, how did you meet Paul Corleone? He was introduced to me by his mother, Mary said quietly. At a charity event. She told me he was divorced and lonely. Did Mrs. Dorothy Corleone know her son was still married when she made that introduction?
Yes.
She told me later that she didn't consider the marriage real because Catherine couldn't have children. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. And when you became pregnant with Paul's child, what did Mrs. Corleone tell you? Mary's voice shook. She said I was carrying the Corleone heir, that I had a duty to the family, that if I tried to leave, she'd take my baby and destroy me in court. Did Paul want to be with you? Tears streamed down Mary's face.
No.
He cried the night our son was born. He said he loved his wife. He said he was sorry. He said his mother had trapped us both. Sutton played the recordings, Dorothy's voice, cold and commanding, threatening Paul, manipulating Mary, promising to deal with Catherine after Paul's death. The courtroom was silent except for the damning words pouring from the speakers. When it ended, Sutton turned to the judge. Your Honor, this woman didn't just disapprove of her son's choices. She engineered a secret family to punish him for marrying someone she deemed unworthy. Victor Strachey's cross-examination was weak, and he knew it. Mary didn't waver. Next witness, Judge Carmichael said. The plaintiff calls Catherine Tessio. Catherine's heart hammered as she took the stand. She met Dorothy's eyes across the courtroom and didn't look away. Sutton's questions were straightforward. Catherine told her story. 15 years of marriage, the infertility diagnosis, Paul's reassurances, his death, the ambush at her door, the eviction. Did you know about the second family? Sutton asked.
No.
Never. Not until 4 days after I buried my husband. Did you know Paul had transferred the properties to your name? Not until we found the deed. But it doesn't surprise me. Paul told me every day that I was his family, that I was enough. I believe he meant it. Her voice broke, but she kept going. Paul was a good man trapped by a controlling, cruel woman who valued bloodline over humanity. And even though he made terrible choices, he tried to make it right before he died. Dorothy's face was stone. Victor's cross-examination tried to paint Catherine as bitter and vindictive, but she remained calm, honest, raw. I loved my husband, she said firmly, and I will not let his mother erase me like I never mattered. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Final witness, Sutton said. The plaintiff calls Rebecca Marks. A nervous woman in her 50s took the stand, Gerald Marks' wife. Mrs. Marks, did Dorothy Corleone contact your husband after he submitted his affidavit supporting Paul Corleone's intentions?
Yes.
She came to our home, offered him $50,000 to recant his testimony. Gasps echoed through the room. Did he accept? Rebecca's voice trembled.
Yes.
We were drowning in debt for my medical bills. He was desperate. But after he did it, he couldn't sleep.
Couldn't eat.
The guilt was destroying him. So, I'm here to tell the truth. Sutton submitted bank records showing a wire transfer from a Corleone family account to Gerald Marks 2 days before his recantation. Victor Strachey looked like he wanted to disappear. Judge Carmichael's expression was thunderous. Mrs. Corleone, stand up. Dorothy rose slowly, her face finally cracking. I've been a judge for 23 years, Carmichael said, and I have never seen such a blatant, calculated abuse of power and manipulation of the legal system. You coerced your son. You manipulated Ms. Rizzi. You defrauded Mrs. Tessio. You bribed a witness. You are a disgrace. She turned to the bailiff. I want the Cook County State's attorney notified immediately. Mrs. Corleone, you're looking at criminal charges for fraud, witness tampering, and obstruction of justice. Dorothy's lawyer tried to speak, but the judge silenced him with a look. As for the estate, Judge Carmichael continued, the property transfer executed by Paul Corleone stands as legal and binding. Catherine Tessio is the rightful owner of all properties listed in that deed. Furthermore, I'm awarding Mrs. Tessio full life insurance benefits, compensatory damages for emotional distress, and legal fees. She slammed the gavel. Mrs. Corleone, you played games with people's lives. Now you pay the price. The courtroom exploded. Catherine couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Sutton grabbed her hand. We won. Catherine, we won. Behind them, Mary was sobbing with relief. Across the aisle, Dorothy Corleone stood frozen, her empire crumbling around her. And for the first time in months, Catherine felt something she'd almost forgotten.
Hope.
6 months later, Catherine stood in the sun-filled lobby of the Tessio Hope Center, watching as women filled the chairs for the afternoon support group. The center had been Paul's final gift to her, funded by the settlement money, the life insurance payout, and the compensation the court had awarded. It was a place for women struggling with infertility, grief, and betrayal to find healing and community. On the wall behind the reception desk hung a plaque. You are enough. Your story matters. Your healing begins here. Words Paul had whispered to her 1,000 times. Words she now spoke to women who needed to hear them just as desperately as she once had. Catherine, her assistant, a kind young woman named Claire, poked her head into the lobby. The publisher's online too. They want to discuss the book tour. Catherine smiled. Her book, Enough, Healing After Betrayal, had released 2 months ago and was already in its 3rd printing. Women across the country were sharing their stories, finding strength in Catherine's journey from devastation to redemption. She'd never imagined becoming an author. Never imagined her pain could become someone else's hope. But here she was. Tell them I'll call back in an hour, Catherine said. The support group starts in 10 minutes. The criminal charges against Dorothy Corleone had been swift and brutal.
Fraud.
Witness tampering. Obstruction of justice. She'd been sentenced to 18 months in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution to Catherine, Mary, and Gerald Marks. The Corleone family empire, built on manipulation and control, had crumbled almost overnight. Paul's brothers had tried to distance themselves, claiming ignorance of their mother's schemes. The court hadn't been sympathetic. Catherine didn't feel vindicated, exactly. Just tired. Ready to move forward. Ready to let go. The trust fund she'd established for Ethan and Sophia had been the hardest decision, and the most important. Paul's children deserved security. Deserved education. Deserved a future free from their grandmother's toxicity. So Catherine had set aside a significant portion of the settlement, enough to fund their schooling through college, enough to give them opportunities Dorothy would have used as leverage. But she'd done it without strings. Without control. Just love. Mary had cried when Catherine presented her with the legal documents. "You didn't have to do this," Mary had whispered. "Yes, I did," Catherine had replied. "They're Paul's children. And Paul loved them, even if he didn't know how to show it properly. I won't punish them for the sins of their grandmother." Now, Mary brought the kids to the center once a month. Ethan was in first grade, reading at a third grade level. Sophia had started dance classes and talked about being a ballerina. They called Catherine Auntie K. And somehow that felt right. The support group ended at 4 p.m., and Catherine locked up the center as the sun began its descent. She drove home, to her home, legally and emotionally hers now, and pulled into the driveway of the house she'd once thought she'd lost forever. She'd refurnished it slowly, not trying to recreate what was, but building something new. The walls held new photos, her and Mary and the kids at the park, her and Sutton celebrating the book launch, her standing in front of the Hope Center on opening day. A life rebuilt. As she walked to the front door, she noticed her neighbor, James Lynch, tending to his garden next door. He was in his early 60s, a retired architect who'd moved in 3 years ago. He'd always been kind, waving hello, offering to help with yard work, leaving fresh tomatoes from his garden on her porch. After Paul's death, he'd been respectful, giving her space but letting her know he was there if she needed anything. Lately, they'd been talking more. Long conversations over the fence about books, about healing, about second chances. He looked up as she approached, his warm brown eyes crinkling with a smile. "How was your day?" "Good," Catherine said and meant it. "Really good." "I'm making too much pasta for one person," James said a little shyly. "Would you like to join me for dinner?" No pressure. Just company. Catherine felt something flutter in her chest. Not the desperate, all-consuming love she'd had with Paul. Something gentler, steadier. Something that felt like a beginning. "I'd like that," she said softly. James's smile widened. 7 o'clock? Perfect. That evening, as Catherine sat in her garden waiting for dinner, she pulled out her journal, a practice her therapist had recommended. She wrote about the day, about the women she'd helped, about the progress Ethan and Sophia were making, about the quiet, unexpected possibility of James. And then she wrote about Paul. "I forgive you. Not because what you did was right, but because holding on to anger was killing me. You were weak, but you tried. You were trapped, but you fought back. You ran out of time, but you left me the tools to survive. I'm not the woman you married anymore. I'm stronger, fiercer, more myself than I've ever been. And I'm finally enough." She closed the journal as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. James appeared at her gate, holding a bottle of wine and smiling. "Ready?" he asked. Catherine stood, smoothing her dress, and smiled back. "Yes," she said. "I am." And for the first time in a very long time, Catherine Tessio walked forward, not away from her past, but into her future.
Whole.
Healed.
Free.
This is Catherine's story, a story of betrayal, justice, and the unbreakable strength of a woman who refused to be erased. If this journey touched you, leave a comment sharing your thoughts. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now, because every week we're bringing you stories of resilience, hope, and triumph. Thank you for being here. Until next time, remember, you are enough. Your story matters. And your